So we had a lot of very influential people speaking at the Nashville Bitcoin conference, and we want to stay as apolitical as possible in this channel. However, regardless of your political leaning, I think we can all agree that it's great to see governments and presidential candidates getting serious about Bitcoin. So let's start with Trump. I remember some years ago when Trump was pretty negative about Bitcoin, which was pretty disappointing to me. So it's great to see a huge shift in his sentiment. And it is evident that Vivek Ramaswamy, Trump's children, and various other Republican candidates have had a very positive influence on him in this regard. So being open-minded and admitting your past errors is a great quality in my opinion. So let's start with the first clip.
But I'm thrilled to be here in Nashville to become the first American president ever to address a Bitcoin event anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world.
So you can clearly see Trump is positioning himself as the pro-Bitcoin presidential candidate from the beginning of the speech, which is difficult to argue against because we have seen the sentiment of many of the senators from the Democratic Party over the last 4 years.
Spirit that built America, and this is the spirit that's going to help us make America great again. That's what we're doing. I stand before you today filled with respect and admiration for what the Bitcoin community has achieved. It's incredible, actually. I sort of say to my sons, it's like incredible because they know so much about it. They're so aware of it, much more so than people that are a little bit older. But I say this is the steel industry of 100 years ago. It really is. I think you're just in your infancy. I can see it happening.
So Trump likes to look at things from an economic perspective, and you can see him comparing Bitcoin to the US steel industry from 100 years ago. And Bitcoin mining is definitely an industry that should stay in the United States instead of being pushed out by the new tax increase proposals that we have seen lately. And we saw how China lost their dominant mining position, and that will ultimately cost them dearly in the long term. Then again, it is a way to maintain control over their population, so there are benefits to it if you want to maintain a horrible authoritarian regime.
In just 15 years, Bitcoin has gone from merely an idea posted anonymously on an internet message board to being the 9th most valuable asset anywhere in the world. Can you believe that? Is that right? That's a big deal. Think of that. It's already bigger than ExxonMobil. Soon it will be surpassing the entire market cap of silver. It's not bad. How about gold? How about gold? Let's go gold. And one day it probably will overtake gold, but based on the way it's going now, it could very well be a possibility. There's never been anything like it, and I don't think you've ever seen anything like it. And most people have no idea what the hell it is. You know that, right?
So we definitely agree. Our power law theory shows that Bitcoin will eventually overtake gold's market cap and become the main store of value in the world. So he's definitely right in that regard. Let's continue.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done. If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. It's going to be. It's not going to be made anywhere else. And if Bitcoin is going...
So you can clearly see Trump continuing a strategy of pursuing dominance in all kinds of different industry sectors, from energy production to Bitcoin mining. And this really illustrates the huge recent trend of going back towards deglobalization and self-dependence. You can see how much leverage other countries can have over your country when they have outsourced everything to them, you know. So there are huge ideological differences between countries like China and the United States. So it is naive to think that relations will just continue to stay the same for the rest of time, right? Eventually there will be some kind of war or something else. And then what are you going to do, right? So it's just smart to keep your industry in your own country.
It should be no surprise that these same totalitarians are hell-bent on crushing crypto and obliterating, and that's what they want to do, and that's what they are stated. They're there right now. You have the SEC, you know what they're doing, obliterating Bitcoin. The reason could not be more clear, because Bitcoin stands for freedom, sovereignty, and independence from government, coercion, and control.
So this is my personal favorite line from the speech, and it really illustrates what Bitcoin represents to freedom-loving people who want government out of their lives. In contrast, governments want more and more control over people, so Bitcoin really was a great invention in that regard and threw a wrench into the works of those authoritarian plans.
We're going to let it grow. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman.
You're fired.
I didn't know he was that unpopular. Wow. I didn't know he was that unpopular. Let me say it again. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. Whoa.
So this is Giovanni's favorite line. Yeah, you know, Gary Gensler really represents the entitled, out-of-touch regulators attempting to destroy an industry they have absolutely no idea about. So the other option is that they do know but choose to do it anyway, so then they're just evil. It's pure and simple.
Next, I will immediately order the Treasury Department and other federal agencies to cease and desist all steps necessary, because, you know, there's a thing going on in your industry. They want to move the creation of a central bank digital currency. It's over. Forget it. CBDC. There will never be a CBDC while I'm President of the United States. And I will always defend the right to self-custody. Self-custody.
Now, this is a very important point. CBDCs are not a complement to Bitcoin, as some people naively think. They are the antithesis of Bitcoin. I don't want Big Brother choosing the products I can buy at the store, or I don't want them to impose some kind of automatic tax increase because of some kind of supposed thought crimes. So CBDCs are really a cancer that need to be rooted out before they become a thing. And again, you can clearly see how Vivek educated him on this topic.
As part of our effort to provide regulatory clarity, we will create a framework to enable the safe and responsible expansion of stable coins. Do you know what a stable coin is? Does anybody know? Please raise your hand. Allowing us to extend the dominance of the US dollar to new frontiers all around the world. America will be richer, the world will be better, and there will be billions and billions of people brought into crypto economy and storing their savings in Bitcoin. So that's the way it is. That's pretty much the way it is. Those who say that Bitcoin is a threat to the dollar have the story exactly backwards. I believe it is exactly backwards. Bitcoin is not threatening the dollar. The behavior of the current US government is really threatening the dollar.
You know, we're really living in a strange timeline when you see Trump explaining stablecoins to people. So he's absolutely right about stablecoins being beneficial to the US dollar in the short term because it helps keep the dollar as the reserve asset of the world. Even us Europeans use dollar-backed stablecoins. Nobody really cares about the euro-backed ones over here either, right? So you can definitely say that Bitcoin is a threat to the dollar in the long term, however, because the importance of the dollar will wane over time. But it's better to keep the dollar as the reserve currency of the world because that's much better than some crappy yuan or other much worse currency. So It's important that the United States prepares for this eventuality. Then it can still remain the dominant superpower by holding massive amounts of Bitcoin reserves and being the leader of the industry.
During my 4 years in office, now you have to listen to these numbers. These numbers are like beautiful. And I don't want to repeat myself. Listen to these numbers. As a result, during my 4 years in office, Bitcoin surged by 3,900% from $898 the day I took office to $35,900 the day I left. That was the biggest jump, I guess, in just about any industry. Think of that. Now compare that to just after 3.5 years of Biden and Harris, adjusted for inflation, Bitcoin is up 50%. Now 50% sounds good, but not when you're comparing it to almost 4,000%.
To be fair, Bitcoin has just been following the power law, so diminishing returns are completely expected. Nothing he said was technically wrong here, but he couldn't make Bitcoin have another 4,000% return or something if he were to be elected president again, let's be real. So that was a great speech from President Trump, but let's get to RFK Jr. now. You will see that he knows much more about Bitcoin, but realistically speaking, his chances of winning are slim to none. Regardless, his speech was amazing, and I want to really cover some of the main points here.
Hello, Bitcoiners. I am so glad to be back for my second Bitcoin conference. Since last year in Miami, I've been meeting with leaders and thinkers from this community. I've conferred with Bitcoin miners, with policymakers, with economists, with financial experts, with investors and developers and entrepreneurs that deepen my understanding of the extraordinary promise of Bitcoin for our country and for our planet. After all I've learned, I intend, as President of the United States, to sign an executive order on day one, directing the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals to transfer the approximately 200,000 Bitcoin held by the U.S. government to the United States Treasury, where it will be held as a strategic asset.
As you can see, this is RFK Jr.'s second Bitcoin conference already, and he intends to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which again is a great idea because it allows the United States to remain the dominant superpower of the world after phasing out the dollar.
On day one as president, I will sign another executive order directing the U.S. Treasury to purchase 550 Bitcoin daily until the U.S. has built a reserve of at least 4 million Bitcoins. And a position of dominance that no other country will be able to usurp. Our nation holds approximately 19% of global gold reserves. This policy will give us about the same proportion of total Bitcoin. The cascading impact.
As you know, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, so 4 million Bitcoins would be a very influential 19% share of the total Bitcoin supply.
From these actions will eventually move Bitcoin to a valuation of hundreds of trillions of dollars. On day one as president, I will sign also an executive order directing the IRS to issue public guidelines that all transactions between Bitcoin and the US dollar are unreportable transactions. by extension, non-taxable.
Great. Bitcoin should really be treated as money, and this would greatly help with Bitcoin becoming legal tender like in El Salvador.
Now, I want to say a couple of words about my observations about the Bitcoin community, which I consider myself part of. Despite their different viewpoints, I found the most striking feature of Bitcoin community is this kind of paradoxical juxtaposition marked by fierce divisions on several minor issues and an overwhelming sense of unity within the larger Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin community reminds me of how American politics ought to be, fiercely diverse, but ultimately united in our aspirations and our belief in our country and in our convictions that America is worth the fight. And in the end, we all come back together, united in our belief that Bitcoin is a technology for freedom, for optimism, for independence, for democracy and transparency. It is the currency of hope. It is the perfect currency.
Absolutely correct. There really shouldn't be any question about this because support for Bitcoin shouldn't be a partisan issue. If you're for liberty and justice, then Bitcoin should be the way to go. No matter whether you're a, like a blue-haired hipster with a nose ring or a God-fearing guy wearing a cowboy hat.
We had embedded with the striking truckers in Canada a reporter for our newsletter, and she was traveling with the truckers from Alberta all the way to Ottawa. And the truckers are very diverse in Canada. They're Asian, they're black, they're white. The trucking strike, the truckers were doing something that all of us in our country take for granted. They were assembling to petition their government about something that they thought was important, which was that the impacts, the financial impacts of the mandates on their businesses. If you look at the videos of that event, it was like Woodstock. People were giving out water bottles, they were picking up trash, they were playing music, they were being kind to each other. But it was portrayed by the Canadian government as a right-wing, extremist, violent terror organization. And the government began using facial recognition systems and other forms of surveillance to learn the identity of the truckers, looking at their license plates, et cetera. And then it froze their bank accounts. And it froze their $12 million PayPal account. And when Canada did that, it occurred that the premier template of democracy in the world besides the United States, it occurred to me immediately that transactional freedom was as important as freedom of expression in the First Amendment.
Yeah, this is the reason why the government shouldn't really have any control over your transactions. Can you imagine what would be going on if they also had some kind of mandated CBDCs to control your every move? It would be a total nightmare.
Last year at this conference, I proposed that as your president, I would fight to ensure the right to self-custody Bitcoin, to run nodes in our own homes, to stop the federal government from usurping the First Amendment rights to open source, privacy-enhancing technologies. I pledged to prevent government officials from adopting CBDCs, which would inevitably morph into what we saw in Canada, a malevolent tool for surveillance and control. Most importantly, I promised to secure the United States position as the global hub of cryptocurrency innovation and entrepreneurship and investment and technology.
You can really see RFK Jr.'s knowledge of Bitcoin when he's talking about things like self-custody and nodes. He also shares Trump's vision of making the United States the global hub and leader of the crypto industry.
As a lifelong environmentalist, I embrace Bitcoin as a mechanism for incentivizing greater investment in green and renewable energy production.
Yeah, the World Economic Forum's propaganda of Bitcoin being this dirty, energy-wasting menace is getting really old. We all know that Bitcoin mining is only viable when you have a surplus of energy, whether that's a hydroelectric dam, a geothermal plant, or a natural gas plant that is producing more energy than the local infrastructure requires. So the choice then is whether you want to throw away that surplus energy or convert it into an economically valuable commodity. Nobody is setting up coal plants just for the sake of mining Bitcoin. That would be way too unprofitable.
Since then, the dollar's purchasing power has been in precipitous decline, eroding savings and earnings of everyday Americans. Alan Greenspan, who was the chair of the Fed for 20 years, even warned that, quote, in the absence of a gold standard, there is no way to prevent savings from confiscation through inflation, end quote. Inflation, as we all know, is theft, and it's almost always theft from the poor.
Only the rich are able to invest their surplus money into assets that are protected against inflation because they have the knowledge and the extra income to do so. Everybody else is getting continuously robbed by the feds. So Bitcoin fixes this rigged game and allows everybody to keep the fruits of their labor.
Printing has drained our citizens of their purchasing power through the hidden tax of inflation. And it was the Trump and Biden administration's reckless embrace of money printing that have pushed the middle class over the tipping point now. American households are now buckling under the strain. Let's look at it simply. If you had $1,000 6 years ago, that $1,000 has a value of $520 today in terms of its capacity to purchase goods and services. Mortgages have doubled in 4 years. No wonder half of the 18 to 30-year-olds are still living at home, unable to afford the homes that provide the first step toward the American dream. No wonder our younger Americans are marrying later, delaying or even abandoning the choice to start a family. Their dwindling purchasing power forces them into these sacrifices. The hopelessness of the task of steadily growing savings, which we all assumed that was just part of our lives, it has pushed. And now today, this generation is facing these moving goalposts. They make money, they think they're doing well, and then the money disappears. And not for anything they did, but because inflation.
He nailed it here. It's a sick game. Compare the average US wage against the price of an average house. How on earth are young people supposed to buy homes and start families if it takes decades of work to afford what is essentially a shed compared to the standards of the 60s, for example? I have a son, and we have the same problems here in Europe, but it's even worse in America. My eyes almost rolled out of my eye sockets when I saw the home prices listed on billboards while walking around in New York. $1 million for a small house. Then you have to work for decades to pay that off while inflation eats away at your savings even more.
If the world were on a Bitcoin standard and our money held its value, we would all have the ability to live more abundant lives. Bitcoiners have it right. Fix the money, fix the world.
I think this is a great point to end with. So many of the problems that we have are due to the rigged financial system that we have. Fixing money and the economy solves so many of the problems we have and is arguably the best way to increase human prosperity worldwide. We have to keep fighting against all forms of government tyranny, whether that's hidden theft in the form of inflation or tyrannical CBDCs. And fortunately, Bitcoin's power laws tell us that there is a path, and that path will go to several $1 million, and it will lead us to more wealth, freedom, and prosperity. By the way, guys, check out our powerful LuxAlgo indicator package and join our free Telegram group by sending me a private message on X. We're already having some great discussions on our channel, so you're not going to want to miss out. Anyway, this is Saverio speaking, and as always, thanks for watching.